Zendikar Rising Spoilers have completed. We weren't able to last week, so we are going to finish out our entire set review. We've got quite a few cards to get into, and they are spicy. Let's wrap out this set review. The video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jay Controller Magic. I am Joel. We are going to get into the end of Zendikar Rising previews. I was off last week, and so we weren't able to complete the preview season video series, and this video is going to wrap us out. Want to have a quick reminder that on Wednesday, September, let me check my calendar, 16th, that early access preview event is happening, and we will be participating in that. We will be streaming the new set with a Wizards provided, fully stocked account ready to go here on YouTube. We'll be streaming it. Make sure you come and hang out with us on Wednesday. Bring your deck lists that you want to see. I'm more than happy to take suggestions. Jump in there, try out some cool decks, try out the new cards, see what the sealed is like, see what the draft is like. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get into these cards. So we ended the last one last week with our Mammoth that doesn't have Trample and our First Striking Cat. Wait, it doesn't have First Strike. It has Trample for some reason. Let's move on. We saw Vastwood Fortification. Here's a new one, Skyclave Shade, and a very, very cool showcase version of it. One black, one other for a 3/1 with Kicker of 3. It can't block. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And for landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if Skyclave Shade is in your graveyard and it's your turn, you may cast it from your graveyard this turn. I think this card is nuts. This card reminds me a lot of Bloodghast. I think that this is kind of a callback to Bloodghast. That card was pretty excellent when it was in Standard, and I think that this card will be too. I think that, you know, older formats, maybe even historic, this might be more viable just because of the support that it would have. You know, with graveyard effects and maybe getting it into the graveyard. You know, it's popping out. Kind of wish it had haste. You know, that's going to be what maybe keeps it down, is no real avoidance, no real haste, but there's already a lot of sack decks running around like crazy. So the possibility of having this as a sackable target that then comes back pretty easily and can come back bigger for 5 mana, it can come back as a 5/3. I think it provides some possible value that could be very excellent. Look, everybody, a negate reprint. Moving on. Scavenged Blade. 1 red, 1 other. When it enters, attach it automatically, like I've said multiple times. I love this effect in this set. I think that's going to make equipment a viable option in this set. It'll stand to see how it does, but I think it's pretty excellent. Just +2/+0 on top of that, no other abilities. Grakmaw, Skyclave Ravagers, a 1 green, 1 black, 1 other, legendary Hydra Horror. Enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it whenever another creature you control dies. If it had a +1/+1 counter on it, put a +1/+1 counter on Grakmaw. When Grakmaw dies, create an XX black and green Hydra creature token where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Grakmaw. I could see this being excellent in some sort of, you know, Golgari graveyard +1/+1 death triggers and +1/+1 counters deck. I think that this could really work. It's all going to depend on how much support it gets. As a commander, I think that there are better options. You know, I think that there are like strictly better options for this that also provide more colors. However, I think it could still be a fun commander because of all of the synergy built onto it. That is a lot of text. So pretty cool legendary creature there. Or on Reef Ooze, we're going to add to our oozes in Standard and also give some +1/+1 counter tribal stuff going that Grakmaw may be able to synergize with. We've already got Scavenging Ooze. 1 green, 2 other for a 2/2, enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, can target itself, doesn't have to. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. So this creature, if a deck like this is viable, is definitely part of the deck. You know, Grakmaw's dope, but it is legendary, so it can't, you know, running 4 of it. Maybe if it's a big kill target, you know, that's not the craziest thing that a low CMC legendary creature is 4 of. Looking at you, Uro. But, you know, if it could possibly make it, you know, it's just going to depend on the support for a +1/+1 counter deck. It'd be very cool, actually, to see that in the meta, honestly. I would enjoy playing that. Ghastly Gloom Hunter is a limited bat. 2 cost for a 1/1 flying lifelinker. If it was kicked, it enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So a very good common for black in limited. Sizzling Barrage is 4 damage to a creature that blocked this turn. Pretty narrow. Felidar Retreat. I really like this card. 1 white, 3 other. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. Create a 2/2 cat beast, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. These creatures gain haste until end of turn. Gain vigilance until end of turn. I don't know what word I was reading. Felidar Retreat, I think, has a lot of promise. I think at 4, it's a little expensive. It's a little slow, I should say. At 3, this would be bonkers. But on your 4 drop, if you play it on turn 4, you've probably already land dropped that turn. If you play it on turn 5 before you make your land drop, it's possible, but you really need some good, go wide already rocking. However, repeatable in white, repeatable abilities to put creature tokens onto the battlefield, those are always played. That's always a premium card in those decks. And so I think that for that reason, this card has some promise. We'll have to see how quick the standard format is after Zendikar Rising becomes the new norm. Shadow's Verdict for some black board wipe. Black, 3 other. Exile all creatures and planeswalkers with CMC 3 or less from the battlefield, and all creatures and planeswalker cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from all graveyards. Later, Uro. We'll catch you later, dog. We're going to exile you for 5, and you're going to have to deal with it. 1 red, 1 other for Thundering Rebuke 4 to a creature or planeswalker. I'm loving that they're putting or planeswalker on a bunch of these cards. That's been necessary for a long time. If they're going to make those cards a huge part of this game, which they are, War of the Spark. But I think that we need more removal, more answers for them, and then they can just keep it up. Keep printing planeswalkers right into the ground. Get them all out here. Make them crazy. Just give us ways to answer them, that are viable, that we don't lose value on. Agadeem's Awakening. This is our black mythic dual-face modal card, land. Black, X, return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost, X or less. This one could get pretty nuts, I'm pretty sure. I mean, you're returning, it's coming in as a untapped land for 3 life. But the ability to return, for 5, 6, 7, 8. For 8 mana, you're returning 5 creatures if you've got them in your graveyard. A 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. I really think that this could be viable. It's obviously a great EDH card. We'll see in Standard, ramp decks are a thing. Sultai Ramp maybe wants this. They don't run a lot of creatures, so I'm not sure why that would be a strategy that they would want to take. But this is definitely an EDH card. It's probably my favorite one of these that we've seen. I'm just a big fan of big splashy spells, especially for swamp mana in EDH. Huge fan. Big fan of Agadeem's Awakening. Storing Thought Thief is a black and a blue for a 1/3 flash flying human rogue. As long as an opponent has threshold +1, 8 or more cards in their graveyard, rogues you control get +1/+0. So it does give itself +1/+0, which is nice. And whenever 1 or more rogues you control attack, each opponent mills 2 cards. I'm very intrigued by this card. I think that this may be one of the types of cards that pushes rogues as a tribe over the edge. We'll see. They really want us to focus on the party mechanic. We'll see if they intend that to be more of a limited mechanic, or if they do intend for some constructed deck that has to do with the party mechanic bust out. But probably the best thing to do, at least traditionally, is focus on one tribe. And with rogues, we're starting to see that maybe rogues are getting enough support. Master of Winds is a Sphinx Wizard, blue, 2 other for a 1/4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2, then discard a card. So you do net a card when this ETBs, which is pretty excellent. And whenever you cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard, you may have Master of Winds base power and toughness become 4/1 or 1/4 until end of turn. So we can attack in, cast something during combat. Suddenly it's hitting for 4 if it was unblocked, and we've got this little trickery Sphinx thing going. I like it. Very good flavor on this card. Don't know, a blue deck. They want bigger, splashier finishers, and this doesn't really have the hexproof or some kind of avoidance that they really want. But it's possible, and in limited, this is going to be a pretty excellent rare to pull. Scion of the Swarm is black, 3 other for a vampire cleric 3/3. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's a great limited uncommon if you've got a life gain synergy going. A little slow for constructed. Roost of Drakes is a 1-cost enchantment, okay? And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create a 2/2 Drake creature token with flying, and whenever you cast a kicked spell, create a 2/2 Drake creature token with flying. Kicked tribal, maybe just limited, but I mean, it's possible. Kicked tribal. We'll see how many good kicker cards come out of this. Maybe we'll have to do a specific video on if kicker is going to be a tribal strategy, if you will, in constructed. Base camp is interesting to me. It's our land that has to do with our group tribes. Add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard, or activate an ability of a cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard. Why this comes into play tapped, I have no clue. This is so disappointing to see that this card enters the battlefield tapped. Maybe in playtesting, Party Mechanic was just too good to have its own dedicated land for color fixing. But honestly, aggro strategies, unless they've been hyper-focused, hyper-refined, like mono-red strategies, the aggro strategies haven't really had their day lately. And it would be nice to have some mana fixing for a deck, some quick, good mana fixing for an aggro creature-based strategy deck. I don't understand. My bottom line is I don't understand why this needs to come into the battlefield tapped. I am very disappointed. I wish that this card was more like Tournament Grounds, where, you know, it automatically gives the Knights colors, the Mardu colors that you need. Overall, it's a card that is necessary, I assume, in the set to make the mechanic possibly even work for constructed, but just the fact that it enters the battlefield tapped, I really think is going to put a leash on that entire strategy. Ancient Greenwarden is a green mythic, green, 4 other for a 5/7 reacher. You may play lands from your graveyard, and landfall is going to trigger twice. If a land enters the battlefield and causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger it, it triggers an additional time. We've got this, you know, land harmonicon over here as a green mythic. I think that this is excellent. I don't know if it'll hit standard, but honestly, EDH, land-based decks, this one's going to go in there. If you've ever seen any of our 3 Ways video series where we build an EDH commander 3 different ways, Ancient Greenwarden is going to become a staple of those videos for any strategy where we're talking about landfall or big lands or anything like that. That's an excellent card. I'm a huge fan of this. Definitely commander focused, I think, but still very cool. Baying Veil is a very interesting card to me. 1 blue, 1 other for a dual-faced modal card. Sorry, it's still stilting for me to say that. Stilted for me to say that. Instant speed creatures your opponents control get -2, -0, and the other side enters the battlefield tapped. I think that this card actually has potential to be constructed playable. Slowing tempo, that is a huge, huge effect for these decks, and it can fix their mana with these dual-faced modal cards. I mean, I'll say what I've said about all of these cards that have a land on the back. We're going to have to feel out how they play. They seem so interesting and so viable off the rip, but they can't be as powerful as they seem, at least to me. And so I want to say that Baying Veil is a very high possibility card to see some play, but we'll see. It could also, this is the type of card that's either going to be super, super good or like absolute garbage, depending on how well it all works out. Ancient Greenwarden, we've seen Strength of Solidarity. Choose a creature you control, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your party. Makes sense. Null Priest of Oblivion. All right, this card is very interesting. 1 black, 1 other for a 2/1 menacing lifelinking vampire cleric with a kicker of 4, so 6 total to pay everything. When it enters the battlefield, if you paid 6, return target creature card from your graveyard to your battlefield. So you get a menacing lifelinking just short of a bear, and you get a creature back from your graveyard. Any creature, return target creature card. I mean, Drakuseth, let's go get something huge. This is a very interesting card that I will be brewing around. I'm a big, big fan of stuff like this. As you can tell, I really like black cards, so this one, very, very exciting to me. Kargan Warleader is a tribal warriors little anthem ability on there. 3 for a 3/3, not a bad return. You know, these anthem effects more often than not live at that 3 CMC, and so to get a 3/3 in addition to is very good. I think that, you know, it's got potential. Again, it's really going to depend on the tribes and which one's got the best support. Red and white's already got some good aggro tools, especially with Winota and everybody's favorite big flashy sword, aka Embercleave. So we'll see. Tuk Rubble Fort, limited wall. Creatures you control have haste, defender reach for 3. Smite the monstrous, limited removal, power 4 or greater, destruction. Relic Golem, 3 cost, 6/6, can attack or block unless an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. Pay 2 to make a player mill 2. So possible for the Rogue deck that you've got these Relic Golems backing them up and they're just stomping through and you're getting these 6/6s for 3. We'll see. Deliberate's very interesting. 1 blue, 1 other for scry 2, draw a card at instant speed. I think that'll see play. Relic Vials, a 3 cost, pay 2, tap it, sack a creature, draw a card. As long as you control a cleric, Relic Vial has whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So, very good in a cleric deck. It's at 3 CMC. I want this effect at 1 or 2, obviously, to make it very excellent for a tribal constructed cleric deck, but we'll see. It has promise. In Historic, there's a lot of Drain right now. There is a Drain deck that is just on the cusp, just ready to tip over and be an excellent deck, and so maybe something like this can help it out. Skyclave Squid has got a beautiful piece of showcase art here for just a common, but it is a 1 blue, 1 other 3/2 defender. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, Skyclave Squid can attack as though it didn't have defender, so a fun limited common. Glasspool Mimic. All right, so we've got a Shapeshifter Rogue for 3 that enters the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's also a Shapeshifter Rogue, and it's a land on the back. This one, again, this is one of the ones that seems like it could be bonkers. It's just, I gotta play with these DFCs. I mean, the fact that for 3 we're getting a copy of a creature we already control, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's going to whiff because you don't have anything on the battlefield. But the design space here is fascinating to me, and I can't wait to play with these cards. Gul'Draz's Mucklord is a 3-cost crocodile, 2/3. When it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Limited, but fun. Fireblade Charger, 1 red for a 1/1. As long as it's equipped, it has haste, and when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So if you combine a card like Fireblade Charger with a card that we saw down here called Scavenged Blade, on turn 2, you know, it's going to enter the battlefield, auto-attach, and be swinging as a 3/1 that dies in lightning bolts. That's pretty cool. Obviously, on turn 3, you would be able to play the Goblin and the Blade, for instance, in just this example, and have a hasty 3/1 that when it dies, it deals damage to its power to any target. So you get to lightning bolt anything. I think this card actually has potential. I would like to play it. I know that in Limited it'll be cool, especially if you've got some equipped decks going on. And those artifact equipments that come into play and auto-attach, huge fan. Inscription of Insight, we've seen. Master of Winds, Forsaken, Ondu Inversion, we've seen. Let's look at Verazol, the split current, 1 blue, 1 green, and X. Enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each mana spent to cast it, and whenever you cast a kicked spell, you may remove 2 +1/+1 counters from it, and if you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for that copy. I think that this is a very cool design space for a commander. You know, in EDH, you want these abilities and you're copying your splashiest instants and sorceries. That's very cool. They do have to be kicked, and so I'm not sure what that means. You got to really go into the kicker theme, the kicker, you know, kind of tribal thing, but it can copy permanents as well if they're kicked. So as the head of a deck, I wish it was maybe 1 more color for commander. I think that would make it more viable if it was, you know, let's just say Teamer, for instance. But I do think that it's got a lot of potential for commander. For constructed, I don't think so. We'll see. Again, like I was talking with the Drake's enchantment, we'll see if kicker tribal essentially becomes a thing. But I don't have as much hope for this one in standard or a constructed format as I do, tournament constructed format, I should say, as I do for EDH as a possible commander for a kicker deck. Thundering Spark Mage, 1 red, 3 other for a 2/2, enters the battlefield. It deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, where X is the number of creatures in your party. Really good deck. I mean, really good card for Limited, for uncommon, if you've got the party mechanic going, if you're able to pull enough cards to do that. And, you know, it seems like most of the creatures we're seeing have something that is relevant to that. Not all. It's just a crocodile. This isn't a crocodile wizard or rogue. But most of the creatures that we are seeing do have a tribal call out that will work with a lot of this. How about Myriad Construct? 4 for a 4/4 with a kicker of 3. If it was kicked, so if you paid 7, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each non-basic land your opponents control. Wow. And whenever it becomes the target of a spell, sack it and create a number of 1/1 construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. Let's scroll down just a little bit and see how we can give each colorless creature we control +2/+2 with this. And that's just this one card, one synergy that we've seen. Myriad Construct seems like it's got potential for real. I know that, you know, a brown deck, as it were, which is a kind of a, you know, slang term for artifact decks. Brown decks don't really play hard. There was one in Historic that was bouncing around for a couple of weeks, but it fell by the wayside as everybody was kind of gearing up for the Mythic Invitational coverage to see what the top decks were actually going to be. But in a colorless deck with, you know, 2 different Ugins, Myriad Constructs, Forsaken Monuments, the right artifacts to be able to ramp those up as far as mana dorks, you know, this has a lot of potential. I love that when you answer it, it doesn't really die. You know, it's got to be, I guess, board wiped would get it, but if it becomes targeted at all, it just automatically splits into a bunch of 1/1s equal to its power. So you're going to get 4 1/1s, or for 7 mana, you get a +1/+1 counter on it for each non-basic they control. I mean, in EDH, it's obvious. Your opponents control each non-basic. Come on, this card is, for 7 mana, going to be a huge, huge construct that splits into a bunch of 1/1s as soon as it gets targeted. And you can anthem all those creatures up in power, you know? So I'm very excited about Myriad Construct. I think that card's got a lot of potential. We're going to blast through some of the rest of these. A lot of these are limited cards. Tazim Royal Mage, if it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. When this card enters the battlefield, target opponent mills 2 cards, so it's a 3-cost flash flying rogue that can contribute towards your threshold +1. Of course, Celebrate enters the battlefield, you gain a life, or whenever another creature, so it's kind of a Soul Sister type card for 3 mana. Shatterskull Charger is a trampling hasting 4/3 4/3. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. So for 5, it enters as a 5/4. At the beginning of your in-step, if it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter, it returns to your hand. So this is a very cool card for an aggro strategy. I'm really hoping that this one in particular makes it into Constructed, because I love effects like this. I used to play Ball Lightning way back in the day. That was just a fantastic, very entertaining card to me. And I've always liked effects like that, so this is very similar, and I'm looking forward to this card. We got a 0/17 Leviathan Crab legendary creature here for 4. Targeting it costs 2 more for your opponents, and you can pay 3 for it to get +X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of islands you control. So you can swing, and if it's unblocked, make it real big. It's entertaining. Do I think it's good? I don't know. It's very entertaining, though. Relic Axe enters the battlefield. Attach it to a target creature you control. If it's a warrior, it gets +2/+1. And if it's just not a warrior, it gets +1/+1. Again, very good. We'll see how these equipment work, but I love that they come into the battlefield and auto-attach. Here's a Relic Amulet for a tribal strategy. Whenever you cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard, put a charge counter on it. Pay 2, remove all charge counters. It deals that much damage to target creature. So creature removal. There are special edition Charks, the Raging Isles. Allied Assault, 1 white, 2 other, up to 2 target creatures each get +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures in your party. Fine. These are spells that you see in every set, but now they've geared them towards that mechanic, you know? There's a ton of them like that. We just saw one down here where it deals damage to a creature or planeswalker, where X is the number of creatures in your party. Cards like this at 4 CMC always exist. They've just made them more about the party mechanic. Expedition Healer is a Vigilant Bear, 4/2, has lifelink as long as you control another cleric, so it's a bear with some upside. Pressure Point is going to be an instant speed, tap target creature, draw a card for 2 mana, fine. If you don't have a better card, you know, it's decent. It can tempo you out in a limited deck. Chilling Trap, pay 1 instant, it gets -4, -0 until end of turn, and if you control a wizard, you get to cantrip, so that's cool. Nimble Trap Finder is interesting. It goes around the party mechanic, 2/1 for 2, can't be blocked. If you had another of your party, cleric, rogue, warrior, or wizard, enter the battlefield under your control this turn. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, creatures you control gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That's got some cool upside. We'll see what the support looks like. Blood Price, 1 black, 3 other. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order, and you lose 2 life. Not bad. I like how we get a little kind of a scry in black. That's pretty cool. Cards like this never really seem to break out. They're good and limited though. Marauding Blight Priest is a life gain, life drain type strategy card. 1 black, 2 other for a 3/2. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So you get, you know, that ability that is a premium on enchantments and stuff, but you get it on a creature, which is pretty cool. Vanquish the Weak is 3 to kill a creature with power 3 or less. Pyroclastic Hellion, 5 mana for a 4/5. When it enters a battlefield, you can return a land, and when you do, you may return a land, and when you do, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Not bad. A little Hellion 5-cost creature 4/5 that comes in and helps you maybe trigger a landfall ability again and shocks your opponent. Not bad. Shatter Skull Minotaur costs 1 less for each creature in your party, so upside of this is a 2/2 5/4 with haste. Excellent, but you got to deal with that party mechanic, and we'll see how it comes out. Tormenting Voice, that's a reprint. Turn Timber Ascetic is a 5 mana. Giant Cleric 5/4 enters the battlefield, gain 3 life. This is one of those cards for a limited deck where you're like, I need a 5-power creature, so I guess I'll play Turn Timber Ascetic. Cliffhaven Kite Sail is a 1-cost attach it. Creature has flying. Straight up. I love this card. I think that this will be excellent in limited, and you should try and play this if you can get it in draft or sealed. Throne of Mikendi is a rare land. Pay 1 to put a charge counter on it, then tap it and remove a charge counter from it to add 2 mana of any one color. So you've got to sort of charge up this battery, but the battery can then give you more mana on the back end. However, you can only spend this mana to cast kicked spells. I don't love this card. It does give you a little ability to maybe kick stuff more easily, but if you're having to do that with a land that you also need to reduce it, it's just, you're not in a good place. Throne, we've seen Skyclave Sentinel is a 3-cost 2/3 flying defender. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so 7 would be your total cost for a return of a 4/5 flying defender. And if it has a +1/+1 counter on it, and it can attack as though it didn't have defender. I would recommend a strategy where you try and play this. This is a limited card, first of all, but I would recommend a strategy where obviously you pay 3 for a 2/3 flying defender, which is nothing to shake a stick at, and then try to get a +1/+1 counter on it from something else, maybe one of those cards, that ooze that we saw, for instance, coming into the battlefield, puts a +1/+1 counter on it, and suddenly for your 3 mana and the cast of something else, you've got a 3/4 flyer, and that's pretty excellent. Nimble Trap Finder, we've seen Shadow's Verdict, we've seen all these cards. These are just our special editions, and that takes us up to our basic lands and the end of the Zendikar Rising set. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that everybody is hyped for this set. Make sure if you're available on Wednesday, you come through the stream. We're going to be playing all the new cards. We're going to be playing draft, sealed, and constructed standard. If you are interested in seeing some certain deck, please leave that in the comments below or get it ready and bring it to the stream on Wednesday. We'll try and find some time and we will play that deck. I think it could be really fun. Thanks everybody so much. If you want to support us further, we have a Patreon down in the description. Check it out, see if you're a good fit. We think it's pretty cool. Other than that, I'm tapped out. I'll catch you later.